morning, everybody. As Tim said, I'm Ace Burrows, the co-founder and head of SKC Games, and we've now got with me today from Object Innovation, who manage the Epi Centre in Hazel Hill. I'm going to talk briefly about our game studio and what it is that we're doing, and what sort of funding that we've been looking to be raising. We've raised some funding, and I'll talk to you a bit about the support that we've had from the Epi Centre, and then I'll hand off to the beta. Okay, I'm going to just share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see our PowerPoint. Great.
Yeah, looking good.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, so a little bit about who we are. We are a AAA game studio that's based out of Suffolk. We're actually the only AAA game studio in the region, although there is a very strong gaming community within East Anglia. We are developing a role-playing game, which is more of a franchise rather than just a game, because it will be a series of games that we plan to develop over the next decade. That franchise we call Project UN, and we think that Project UN is going to become one of the biggest brands of the 2020s. The team, and this is the key thing about when you're building up a business, and I'm going to sort of not talk much about SKC Games at this point, but I'm going to sort of talk a bit more about the journey we've been on. But SKC Games and Project UN was a concept that I've had for a very, very long time. Having run other businesses myself, specifically in the data analytics and data communication industry, I fell out of the gaming industry a couple of decades ago and found business opportunities in other areas. But I in the last few years, I recently came back into the gaming industry because I had a particular project that I wanted to do. And while I had some experience in the gaming industry, due to obviously the massive innovation that's gone on within that industry, the industry had moved on quite a lot since when I was first in it. And I knew that for us to be able to build an award-winning, fantastic game, we would have to bring in an award-winning team. And so I spent a long time, a couple of years, finding the right people that I think would be ideal to come into our game and work on our project. And you know, bringing people into the project isn't just about finding someone and saying, "Come on, let's get involved." You have to kind of sell the idea and the concept to them as well, and that's not an easy thing when you're trying to build the right team. But that said, we have managed to pull together a fantastic team that is working on really what is a really fantastic project. And just to give you a bit of a taste of the sort of games that this team have worked on in leadership roles, it'll give you an idea of the sort of like the gravitas that the team carries in terms of the games that they've worked on in the past. All right. As well as the core team itself, obviously when you're building a business, you can't do it all yourself. You do need strategic partners. And we have got two very, very good strategic partners working with us on this particular game. We have Unity, who we have chosen to be our engine partners. And we have a company called Target 3D that specialises in the motion capture field for both film, television, and for interactive games. Right. So some of you are probably wondering, what is a AAA game? Well, the gaming industry is absolutely massive, and there are thousands of games that are published each year. But there is a very niche market, which is known as the AAA space, where there isn't so many titles released annually. And the reason for that is because they are very big games that take a long time to develop. These games can take from between 3 to 5 years, and in some cases as long as 10 years to develop. And this is because they generally have very high quality cinematic graphics. They have animation that is actually being generated through motion capture through real actors, as opposed to machine generated. The games themselves tend to have very, very large environments that the player is free to roam in. And, you know, back in the late 90s, the benchmark was set very high by studios like Bethesda when they launched massive open world games that the players can play. And so there is an expectation now that when a player buys an open world game, not only are they following a mainline story, but they're free to go off and do other things that they may well do in the real world, but they're doing in the virtual world. And so these games tend to be quite big. All right. On top of that, as well as main missions and stuff, you know, there is an expectation that players meet other characters in the environment that have got nothing to do with the main story, but may have their own little storylines and quests that they'd like to do as well. And so it's this combination of high quality graphics, performance, motion capture, and large environments and big gameplay that is what is considered a AAA game. Right. Our game is a science fiction game. It's set into the future. You can actually learn more about this game if you go onto our website, www.projectun.uk, and there we've kind of got a little teaser, a bit of text there, kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what the story is about. And what we're planning to do over the next 2-3 years while we're developing the game is to sort of like let more and more out. All right. But the game itself is open world. But that says within the game, the player is able to go off and do other things. Now, the individual can play on their own, or they can play in cooperative with a friend. But what they can also do in the game is they can join a massive audience of people doing events. And what that means is it doesn't necessarily mean that these people are involved in the main storyline of the game, but it's just given the player that ability, if they want to reach out and play other people or challenge people in a particular style of event that we've got running within the game, they can do that. All right. In terms of our innovation and our focus in innovation, building like a big AAA game, it takes an awful lot of people, a lot of different skills. And sometimes when you, a company like us that's starting out in this space, you have to kind of really focus your energy, your skills, and what it is you're actually hoping to achieve. It's going to give you your USPs when you're building your product. And as much as possible, try not to do everything yourself, which is the reason why we have strategic partners such as Unity, who are providing us with the core game engine. And that said, on top of that engine, we're doing other innovation in areas around machine learning, which everyone likes to refer to as artificial intelligence these days, which the gaming industry has always been involved with. AI has always been a key factor of the gaming innovation. But over the last 2-3 decades, gaming technology has really enhanced in hardware, in quality of graphics, and of course the AI has improved. But with the need for AI and machine learning to have an awful lot of data that needs to be processed to really get patterns and outcomes of what it is that you're trying to achieve, it's only been in recent times that power has actually been there. And so at SKC, what we believe, the next 10 years, maybe even the next 10 to 20 years, real big innovation in the game industry is going to come in that space, in that AI space, in terms of how characters are interacting with characters within the game, not just in terms of what those characters are doing, in terms of challenging the player and changing the outcome of the way the player is playing, but also in the way that they communicate with that player. With the speaker you saw before us, when they had their AI characters talking on the screen, and probably takes you through a journey, and as you're learning about your medical history. That same type of technology will be used in gaming when players are talking to the characters in the game. Now today, that is very linear, very structured, very specific. You can talk to characters in the game today. Technology is there, it's there, people can do it. A lot of people don't bother, but they can. But they have to give quite specific instructions. But in the future, they won't. They'll be able to have a chat with the player that they're playing with in the game, and it will feel real. And that's the kind of eerie thing about the way that sort of technology is going. And for us, that's a really big area that we're specifically focusing our attentions on at the back end. So not the stuff you see at the front end, you can see the outcome, but it's all the clever stuff that we want to do at the back end. So our game itself is a AAA RPG, open world, stealth shooter, hacking. It is a bit of everything for everybody. And that's deliberate, because if you're actually creating an open world environment that's replicating the real world, there's a little bit of everything in the real world as there is in this game. All right. The game itself is set into the future, not too far into the future. The year is 2114, but in that time, we have discovered a new planet, and there are now 2 Earths that are involved, that are working and communicating with each other. And unlike a lot of stories about us discovering worlds and us going to war with all these planets, we're not actually at war with this planet. We work with this planet. You know, we have a relationship with this planet. And in fact, what's happened is where we have globalization, that's kind of elevated into universal ization, where planets are trading. And of course, when you've got trading between planets, you potentially are inviting criminal entities into that, and you have interplanetary crime. And so our game is kind of set in that kind of scene where your characters that you're playing are playing investigators that are not working for the police or for your government, but you're actually working for the UN, who's become the elevated voice for Earth and for the fictional planet Tamadine. Right? Now, the future isn't apocalyptic. It isn't a utopia. And what we've done is we've worked with some historians. We've looked at what's happened in the last 100 years, and we've tried to guess what the next 100 years might look like, especially if we discovered another planet. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an environment for the player that gives them discovery, but at the same time gives them some familiarity. So while they're discovering new things, they're seeing things that are similar and things that they can see today. And we kind of see that as a way of kind of enhancing people's view of the planet that we have today, in the context of what that could look like in the future, while at the same time taking them into new worlds and new discoveries. So yeah, it's got kind of a really big ambition in terms of what we're trying to achieve. But what we've done quite cleverly, the team have managed to do, is to bring that vastness down into a structured story, so that while the player is in this big environment, and it is a big environment, the story itself is a very manageable, deliverable proposition that the player can do without, you know, getting lost. All right. I talked about the characters. The game itself has got 3 main open world environments. It's got a location on Earth, which I can actually tell you it's actually the Isle of Rum in Scotland, and the Isle of Ig. It has a colossal space station. Now, this space station sits between the 2 planets. It's there for a reason. I'm not going to explain what that reason is, giving too much away, but it is a huge station. It's like, it's as big as the Isle of Rum, maybe even bigger. And it ends up being a place that you travel to when you go to the fictional planet, which we call Taradine. What we've been doing as a business is we've been raising investment. We're raising investment to build the minimal viable product of our game, which is effectively the core game mechanics, the open world environments that we've generated for Taradine and Earth, and the intro stories for the 2 main characters in the game. Although, like you would expect from role-playing games, you get to develop these characters, and they end up becoming your own. But we've also been looking to raise the funding for the full production of the game. And you know, building a game like this, a AAA game, you know, it will cost 10 million plus to complete the full production of the game. And that in this particular space is actually a relatively small budget for a game. You know, some bigger titles spend 20, 30, 40 million. There's been titles, the most expensive developed title is Destiny. It cost $500 million to build. So it certainly sounds like it's a lot of money we're raising, but actually in the space that we're operating in and the people we're competing with, our budget is very, very modest. And from me, thank you.
Thank you, Asa. So as you can see, the vision is huge. It's been brilliant to have Asa at the centre. The centre, as Tim said earlier, is the Epi Centre in Haverhill, where we're calling from today. And it's an innovation centre that opened in March of last year. So just to give you an idea, it's like a 4-storey building, just short of 30,000 square foot of office space with laboratory space on the ground floor. And Asa is one of our first customers who's taken residence on the very top floor of the centre. The work that, so the centre is part of Oxford Innovation's network of 27 centres around the UK. And all of the centres have the same ethos, which is how do we bring startup organisations into the space? How do we help them to grow? And then how do we help them to exit into the local ecosystem to support economic prosperity? With the games project, it's been particularly interesting because the work that ACE is doing is not just about how do we create a AAA games employer in Suffolk, but it's bigger than that. It's going to need a whole ecosystem of games companies to support this project for this to be successful. So part of the work that we're doing here at the centre at the moment, for example, is to see whether we can build a motion capture studio, which will end up being the biggest of its kind outside of London in the game space. And that facility would also be available to the academic institutions in the East of England to start to bridge the gap between what's happening in academia and what the needs are of the games industry. So there's work that we're doing like that, and those sort of projects, I think that's the value, I guess, in being part of a centre like this, an innovation centre, which is all around how do we bring companies in and how do we help to accelerate the growth that they need to go through. I guess the other piece of that project as well is that, you know, how can we bring in, how can we create a support infrastructure for individuals that want to graduate in the game space and go and create their own startup. And that comes back to this ecosystem that I'm talking about, which is supporting SKC Games with their vision, but then creating some smaller organizations in that startup space to come in and provide support for the bigger vision that we have with SKC Games. So I'll probably wrap up there because I'm conscious that I think, Tim, we're running a little bit over time, aren't we?
No, you're all right for a few minutes. If you want to just carry on, that's fine.
Okay. So with the work that we're doing here, I mean, the Oxford Innovation Centres are all about supporting early stage companies. And so many of the centres have innovation directors like me based at the centre, because we recognise that a key part of growth for startups is not necessarily, you know, people like Asa come in and they have brilliant ideas with what they want to do. But they are very focused on the space that they're in. And for a company to be successful, they need more than that. They need support with raising investment. And, you know, Hayden touched on that earlier already. They need support with creating the right infrastructure. You know, they need there's heaps of other functions within a business that need to be fulfilled for that company to be successful. And so working with ASA, it gives me the opportunity to help provide some of that support. And if I can't help them directly, then I can certainly go away and find somebody who can. So right now we're in the middle of seeing whether we can get the investment in place, see whether we can get the motion capture studio investment in place for that facility to be built here. And then at the same time, see whether there's an appetite for a games accelerator that we'll create here for startups as well on the top floor at the Epi Centre.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just to sort of add to that, one of the important things about these programs and networks is, while we may all operate in very different industries, a lot of the technology that we're all using or we're all working towards all have a very similar application. So if you take the scenario that we're doing in terms of our artificial intelligence project, we've got some great people that are worked in the gaming space, but we're also looking to collaborate with other people outside of the gaming space, also working on machine learning technology, because a lot of that work that they're doing really can complement what we're doing and vice versa. So again, you know, having these sort of networks, you know, if there's people that are working in that space, then, you know, we want to talk to them, and no doubt they might want to talk to us as well. So, and then that works great. And, you know, with SKC Games, we picked the Epi Centre. We didn't pick the Epi Centre because of the business support programs. We didn't know until we came to the place that they had it. But oh my goodness, it's been one of the best things for us since we've got here, because it's really taken an element away from myself. When you're starting a new business, you're an entrepreneur, you wear so many hats. CEO, CTO, Chief Operating Officer, Project Manager, doer, coder, you name it, even T-boy, you do a lot. And it becomes incredibly challenging and time consuming. having that business support there really does take some of those pressures away. And it also helps you understand yourself, what your own personal strengths and weaknesses are, and because of that, I've kind of looked for certain types of skills where we've got gaps in our knowledge within our studio. And for me, I'm a technology guy. I've always been the chief operating officer or chief technology officer, but I've only occasionally stepped into the managing director role. Obviously, this project, I'm the CEO, but we're smart, we're intelligent, we've got a great team, and we know that actually probably my best position in the organisation is CTO, and actually we're currently looking for a CEO to come in and maybe steer the ship, because so that we can focus more on the technology side and our innovation. And I think sometimes when you're sort of like an entrepreneur starting a business, you have to understand what you're trying to achieve and where your strengths and weaknesses are, and lean on the support and the people around you that are there and are willing to help you.
I think just to add to that as well is that when you're on the journey, it gets tough, and especially if you're looking to do a raise, you get to a point where you start to question what you're doing. So staying true to your idea and the business you want to create, and over time is being able to deliver that with a level of conviction, regardless of the feedback you might be getting from external people, potential investors, and all of that stuff. I think is a really big piece of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I just want to add, as it was mentioned before, that when you talk to mentors, or you get people that will say, yeah, take me through your pitch, let's understand it, I can give you some feedback. You will get people that will contradict each other all the time. And what you end up discovering, as I have the hard way, is that actually your pitch really needs to be directed at the audience that you're directing it at, because not all two investors are the same. They might want the same goals, but in terms of what it is they're looking at, it's different. So it is really, really important to try and understand who it is that you're actually pitching to, and have a good selection of slides that you can drop in and out depending on the content you think that they're actually interested in listening in. And it's not that mentors are wrong, it's just they're looking at different views and through different lenses.
That's a great point. So I think it's kind of we can Babita, we can probably plug something that's coming up next spring around that space, which is trying to really look at how we get a wider range of investors, especially across around the Cambridge cluster and over to Oxford and within the east of England, really kind of pointed at businesses and startups here. Very much, I think, on that basis, you want a diverse range of investors with lots of different types of individuals with different interests to get a vibrant ecosystem, right? You can't just have one or two conversations. You need to have lots. You need to tune your presentation to that particular audience, or if it's an angel group, possibly to what that group has set itself out. I mean, this is a key thing, right, Babita?
It is, absolutely. And I always say, whenever you are looking at working with any investor, do your due diligence on the investor. It's equally important that you interview them to make sure they're the right investor for you. There are, the process itself is time consuming for sure, but finding the right investor is hugely, hugely important, because they'll make the right introductions, they'll operate at the right level, they'll get involved at the right level. I've heard some nightmare stories around, where that hasn't worked out, and it's just not worth it. So spend the time, do the due diligence, work out the right investor network. As Tim said, it's a little bit early to share, but we'll be doing some work here in March next year, where we are looking to attract a wide range of investors, and we'll be looking to put forward some companies as part of that pitching process.